Welcome to Ike Eastman's podcast edition. I appreciate you coming on and taking the time. We're in Utah, which is a great place. A little cold. Jeez.
Freezing cold. Yeah.
I've been down here, once a year for 20 years. I've never seen it this cold in the winter.
It's a different shift. It's for sure. It's changing things.
It is.
Sure. Yeah.
It is, which is good. But it's been a crazy winter.
Yeah, I think they were just talking about it with Evan Heber. We were having a conversation about Deseret in northern Utah on a hunt, and said because of the cold, it's going to change everything up there.
Yeah,
they're used to like late ruts because it's so hot up there.
Right.
It's not going to be the case this year, I don't think.
Well, it's crazy. We were on the way down here. There's elk hanging out with cows. Moo cows eating all their food. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this hunting season because it's going to be different, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, you did a little hunting this fall.
Yeah, I got a couple elk. I did Wyoming near Gillette and at a ranch. I did Deseret. I did duck hunting. Some different stuff that I wasn't used to doing.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So on this podcast, as I mentioned before, this isn't really hunting related. It's more who Mike Glover is and what makes you tick. And so I know you always I've heard you say this, and the little Asian in me. Where did you grow up? What's the story behind Mike Glover?
Yeah, so I'm a military brat. My dad was in the Army. My uncle was in the Navy. Come from a line of military guys, and I grew up in Daytona Beach, Florida, after my dad's time in service. But I was born in Fort Ord, California.
Okay.
We moved to Germany, where he was stationed for 5 years, and then when he got out after 12 years, we wound up moving back to where his mom was, my grandma, and she was in South Daytona Beach in Florida. And he got a job in law enforcement, and that's kind of where I grew up until about 12 years old. And then I moved back with my mom because they were separated.
Okay.
To North Carolina. So I split the difference between, Germany, a stint in Germany, a stint in Florida, and then a stint in North Carolina before I went in the Army.
Do you remember Germany? Were you old enough to remember it?
Yeah, I got some memories, some vague memories.
The wall and the crazy east and west and
crazy stuff. I remember growing up, and I remember the snow and how cold it was. But I remember my babysitter at the time. She was a young black gal, and she was incredible. I remember hearing audio tapes of me as a kid interacting with her.
Really?
And she was like my first mom. I mean, it was crazy because I spent a lot of time with her, and I do remember it was great memories. I love Germany.
Yeah, my uncle was a interpreter in Germany in the U.S. Army, and actually he was a colonel when he retired here in Utah. But my cousins would come over, once a year. They'd come pilgrimage back to Wyoming. I had 7 of them.
Yeah,
and their stories were crazy because it was literally the wall and everything that was going on in the 80s in Germany was the epicenter of the Cold War.
Yeah, there's a reason why we still have troops there.
Yeah.
I mean, we just did this thing with the conflict in Ukraine and Russia, and we're negotiating with Germany to get these tanks to these guys.
Right.
And this whole thing is taking place, but we still got troops there. I mean, my dad was stationed there for 6 years.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So Daytona, that's got to be a horrible place to grow up.
Yeah, well, I think as a kid, it was, so it had actually bad stuff associated with it because my grandma at the time lived in a poor neighborhood.
Oh.
And it was near Bethune-Cookman College, and it was on the kind of bad side of the tracks. It wasn't like suburbia. And me and my dad growing up and him in law enforcement, he didn't make a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, we were definitely blue collar and just borderline on the poverty line. But the cool thing is we took advantage of all the opportunities there that were free. So, I mean, my dad's an angler. We grew up fishing 4 days a week.
Wow.
Solid. Ponds, inlets, rivers, ocean, boat, everything you could fish, from bass to dolphin fish. We were fishing it. So I got that opportunity, and it really made an impact on me because my dad was addicted to fishing. He loved it, and it got us outdoors, and it didn't cost anything. Didn't cost anything.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it was fun.
That's awesome. A lot of outdoors people. I started my kids with fishing because it's something they can do. It's something they can do at 7, at 5, you know.
Same.
You have young kids.
My 3-year-olds just fished for the first time up in one of the lakes up in northern Utah, and it was scary because they were flinging those hooks, and I was like, oh my God.
Somebody's going to lose an eye.
It was borderline. It was scary. But they gravitated towards it, and then they wanted to throw it in the water, and, you know, they lost patience, but they love it. So it's already something that I can connect with them.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's one of the reasons why I started duck hunting, because it was an opportunity to bring them into hunting real early.
Yeah, in a blind is a great place because there's a lot of camaraderie that happens in between shots, and it's, you know, there's things happening constantly. I just took I took my oldest last year. She was 10 or 11 at the time. I just took my youngest, who was 10, in the duck blind, and it was so much fun.
It's Absolutely so awesome.
Fun. And to watch your kids bewilder the outdoors is so neat.
Oh, it's so
neat.
Cool. My kids, when I take them outside, are really curious. They love doing it. I'm very cautious because they're mountain lion snacks. They're like the perfect appetizer for a mountain lion. And but they are addicted to the outdoors because we overland, we off-road, we camp, we do all the things, and they've been a part of it since they were babies. I mean, I had them overlanding and camping when they were just infants.
Yeah,
it's been fun.
That's awesome. How old are they now?
So I have two. A boy and a girl, and they're 3 years and 5 months right now.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they're just learning how to talk back. Right now. It's fun. It's so fun.
You're starting to learn everything your parents are like, you just wait till you have kids.
My daughter just tells me no. She's just like, no, Daddy. And I'm like, okay. I don't.
What do you say to
that? And I don't have the vocabulary. She doesn't have the vocabulary to debate.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, okay, I don't know what to say here. I'm getting out of here. It's so fun.
So grew up in Daytona and went to North Carolina?
Yeah. Went to North Carolina when I was 12 and spent that time until I was 16, 17, until I joined the Army. And it was a good time. I lived outside of Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
My stepdad was in the Air Force, which put my mom there. My mom was a small business entrepreneur. She had a little beauty salon, and then went to junior high and high school there, and, you know, learned another version of the outdoors in pine country in Pineland, and had a lot of fun. Grew up with a lot of. I grew up playing in pig pens, you know, in pig farms all over North Carolina, because it was super rural out there.
Yeah.
I mean, Red Springs, Spring Lake, Lillington, and first got introduced to whitetail hunting and the tree stand or the deer stand, and learned a whole bunch about backcountry stuff.
Yeah.
In the pine version of it. Not even understanding there was a whole backcountry mountain
but it's still bush, you know, you're just still bushcrafting back there. You're still learning how to light a fire and, you know, track animals and blood trails and all that stuff.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting because it's completely different, and, you know, depending on where you live in the country, you compare and contrast your experience. But I'm glad I got that because it was very difficult even to navigate. And you can't terrain associate in the middle of pine trees.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of things that I learned before I came into open country, which I was very thankful for.
Yeah. Yeah. You put me in something like that, I'd be lost forever.
It's crazy.
You
have to dead reckon everything. You have to be on the compass, staring at the tree in front of you, and walk to it, and then continue to do that because it's difficult.
Oh, that's great. So then you joined the Army.
Yep. And joined the Army at 17 years old.
Oof.
A baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that always the plan, or was this something you're like, you know what, I need to do something else, or I got in trouble, or?
No, it was the plan. I knew from a child, very young. Like I think my 3-year-old boy does now. I mean, my son, I gave him his first Red Ryder BB gun at 3, and I'm like, thinking back, not that I remember when I was 3. But I probably wasn't competent when I was 15 to hold a BB gun. I mean, me and my cousins were shooting each other at 12. He unwrapped it. He picked it up. He held it right. I tell him, hey, don't point that barrel at people. You know, he's like, I'm going to hunt zombies. Like, yeah, you hunt zombies. Don't hunt people. And he's very cognitive and understanding of the gun and the respect for it. And it's interesting. He's 3.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And so
it's really cool.
You could see it in his eyes. He just is driven that way. And I remember growing up that way because I grew up in a military family that was all about that life. And for me, like I told this story before, when I was 10 years old, I made a bet with my dad that I would be a Green Beret.
Really?
Because I asked him, I said, my uncle was in the Navy, career Navy. He retired and worked for the U.S. Postal Service. And my dad was in the Army. He was in the Army for 12 years. So there was a debate there, like, am I going to go become a Navy SEAL?
Or
Yeah, and or going to be a Green Beret. And I asked my dad, I said, who's the best? And he said, Green Berets. I said, okay, I'm going to be a Green Beret. And I bet him a gun, actually a H&K MP5.
Really?
And I remember where I was in his Camaro. We were driving in Florida, and I remember making him that bet. And he's like, okay, good. And we shook hands. And then, 10 years later, I was a Green Beret. So
do you still have the gun?
I don't. He never gave it to me. He probably couldn't afford it.
Typical dad stuff.
He can't afford it. He'd probably have to get a tax stamp on it. But I wound up getting a SP5 MP5 version of it. But it stuck in my head because I already knew since I was a baby that's what I wanted to do. Yeah.
I've heard. Actually, I think Jack Carr did this the other on Rogan's podcast or something, where Rogan asked him, which one's the best? Which one is the hardest? And he completely avoided that entire question.
Did he?
He danced around it.
He's so nice. That's I'll tell you straight up. I think Navy SEALs is the hardest. Like the Army attrits through the ruck.
Yeah.
Because the ruck is like a tick that just sucks the life out of you.
Yeah.
But the Navy uses the water. And if you're not prepared for the water, like you're not trained up in swimming and all those things, breath holding, you won't make it. And I've seen, because we do these courses at my company, Fieldcraft, where we do resilience breakouts where we spray people with hoses.
Yeah.
Just small stuff. That stuff will break you. It will break grown men into infancy.
Really?
Because we're not resilient. And then when you get that cold water over your back, it just breaks men. And so the BUDS experience, I think, is more difficult. I've seen some of the best operators I worked with get broken in BUDS and quit, and then kind of navigate the Army and Rangers and SF. So I would say it's more difficult, even though, I mean, the attrition in Ranger School, the attrition in Special Forces selection is high, but it certainly, the water does a lot to trip people.
Oh, that's a great explanation. I've never heard anybody tell me that.
Yeah, that's the way they do it.
That's
yeah.
crazy.
Crazy.
I fully expected you're like, oh no, berets, it's going to be the worst.
No, definitely not. I can't remember really having a difficult time because I prepared for it. I mean, so I could see in everybody's demeanor whether or not they prepared for it. So selection isn't a game of like, hey, everybody shows up on an equal playing field.
Right.
You have different levels of preparation.
Right.
So if you're really prepared because you put in the work prior, it's an exercise.
Yeah.
Versus, the most, difficult thing you've ever done in your life.
Right.
I didn't think it was that difficult.
So it's like training for a marathon. If you're not ready, you're screwed.
100%. It's exact like Rob, my marketing guy. He does ultra marathons.
Yeah.
And he did a couple marathons back to back. If you told me to do a marathon right now, I'd die. I think I'd die.
There'd be a lot of walking involved if I did it.
There would be a lot. Yeah, my big butt's not going to do a marathon. But if you told me in preparation, like I did a 50-miler a couple years ago, and I led up to it, I prepared for it, and I just did it. It wasn't that difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't that hard.
Of course, you're obviously mentally strong, which is part of the game.
Part of it, but on a 50-miler, that only goes so far. Yeah. Maybe I'll give you 22 miles, and then you just break. That's how it was for me, at least. I just broke.
Oh, that's awesome. So then you went Green Beret, and you came out of that. So did you retire military?
I did not. A lot of people think I say I retired because it's just the explanation is not worth the conversation. Because so when I got out, so I did how many years active duty? I did 15 years active duty or something like that, and then I did the rest of my time in the reserves. So I had a total of 18 years active service.
Okay.
I could have retired, but they would have activated me for additional 2 years. And I would have been, at the time I was a sergeant major, so I was an E9, and they would have made me go to Afghanistan to work an admin job because
sitting at a desk somewhere in some
somewhere.
shithole.
Yeah, I did not want to do that. And I was also contracting for the government. So I decided to basically submit paperwork just to get out. And when I did that, I got 100% disability. So for me, it wasn't worth
didn't know
the
that.
time. Yeah, I'm 100% service connected
How
disabled.
did you hurt yourself?
Oh, there's many. My back, my left eardrum is completely blown out.
Really? That's why I've seen
yeah.
you turn your head when you talk to people.
Oh yeah, I got to cut my ears most of the time. My right hamstring, I'm missing half my right hamstring. I have had a abdominal obstruction, shrapnel on my forehead, all kinds of stuff.
God, you look really good for all that. I would have
feel
never
good.
guessed.
I feel right. Yeah, when I shave, it takes away it takes 50% of the disability away. I feel good, but I had a rough go of it. I mean, I've been injured a few significant times. As compared to my peers, I'm good compared to my peers.
So that's cool. So you worked with Evan for a while, right? Worked under Evan or with him somehow?
So we were Green Berets together in the same group, in 19th group. I did some team sergeant time on active duty, then transitioned to the reserve component, did some team sergeant times in San Antonio, Texas. And then he was in the same group. And then when I went to the CIA, he recruited me, or he vetted me for the CIA. Okay. So you have to go through it's like an assessment process, and he was literally the guy holding the pro timer, assessing me on a range to tell the agency whether I was good or I wasn't good.
Did you know that at the time, who he was, or was it just a guy?
This is before Black Rifle.
I assumed that.
Well, I knew he was, like, it's crazy because when I hear people talk poorly about Evan, I'm like, that dude would kill you.
Yeah.
That dude is deadly. He said this, so I'm not spilling the beans here, but he has ran pretty high risk classified, it's called special access programs, SAP programs, for both the military and the agency. And I think he talked about one on the Rogan podcast where he did some waterborne or maritime ops and was getting shot at. That's no exaggeration. I mean, Evan has a profound experience in doing the invasion as a Green Beret in the Iraq War. In 2003, when I was in the Q course in training. I was in training to be a Green Beret. He was doing the invasion as a Green Beret, and then had a lot of experience in the agency doing some cool guy stuff for them. So when I met him, he was just an evaluator, pretty high level evaluator for the CIA.
Huh. That's crazy.
It is crazy.
That's got to be. So you look at it back now, because it's been what, 10 years, 15 years?
It's been 7. Yeah.
So you look back at it like a different life?
Completely. I think most people in the military, when they join, they have it's a term called lifer. And you say, oh, you're a lifer. Like, yeah. But if I retired, I would have retired at 37.
Yeah.
And then,
what?
And then you're like, oh, well, what's your plan to retire? Like, I'm going to get on a lawn chair. I'm going to fish. I'm going to go hunt. And then you're like, I'm young. Like, I can do whatever the hell I want. A new career field completely. So it does feel like a new life.
So Fieldcraft is your new career.
Essentially, I feel like it's like it is a completely new world to me.
So for those people that don't know, explain kind of a elevator pitch of what is Fieldcraft? What's your goal there?
Today's content is brought to you by SIG Optics. Now, I've been using SIG for a number of years. They are really innovative. They have come out with unbelievable range finding technology that has changed the industry forever. They now have what I believe is the best binocular on the planet, and that is a stabilizing binocular. If you haven't used them, go check them out. They will change the game in the field. Not only am I a person that hunts in wind a lot, but you can acquire an object in that glass at 16 power a lot faster, tell what size the trophy is, 10 times faster than anybody else that you're sitting with using other glass. It's amazing technology. Rangefinders, stabilizing binos, rifle scopes that are built for the hardcore backcountry hunter. Check them out at SIG Optics.
So, man, it's a lot. I mean, Fieldcraft, for me, the mission statement hasn't changed. I've always wanted to prepare citizens for the worst case scenario using a lot of things that I learned often the hard way in the military, and then also my CIA experience. And so I felt like there's a gap there's always a tactical trainer everywhere you go. Somebody's teaching on a flat range with a gun. You can go get bushcraft skills in the middle of the woods.
Yeah.
But there's not a lot of like modern preparedness education. And I differentiate education from training. Like education is hey, I'm listening to a podcast, I'm getting information on something. Training is the hands-on.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of places that do both. So we wanted to do both, and we also wanted to fill the gap. I look at Fieldcraft Survival as like the conduit between experts and civilians.
Yeah.
Most civilians are just, they're like my dad, who, you know, was in law enforcement, worked at a state prison, did all the things like 9 to 5 and busted his butt just so he can go fishing on the weekends.
Right.
That's most of the country.
Yeah.
And when you get into that lifestyle or that routine, you become complacent when it comes to your own individual preparedness. You don't usually take care of yourself because why? Like you don't have a mission or a purpose where you need to be fit and
Yeah,
strong.
as long as I'm good enough to fish.
Yeah, as long as you could cast or reel, you know.
Right.
So I wanted to create a culture where we said, hey, these are things you need to pay attention to. These are the things that you need to train, because if something happens, and it could be a natural disaster or catastrophe, you need to understand how it works so you could be better prepared. That's the mission. It hasn't changed.
And I think you're 100% right. There's too many people, and I'm guilty of this myself sometimes, where you avoid that, or it's not your day to day, so you're not doing it. And you wake up one day and the power goes out and you go, I really should have done this, or I should be doing that. And then you take a couple steps and then you become complacent again. I was just talking to somebody recently that their power's been out for 2 days in Arizona. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
2 days without power, you want to watch most of America fall apart.
Yeah, that's true. And I myself have those difficult moments. I mean, as a preparedness CEO of a preparedness company, I'm expected to always be prepared. And often I find myself not prepared. Yeah. You know, I went to the SIG Hunter Games.
Yeah, that's actually one of my buddies, one of my best friend's neighbors was where you guys did that.
Yeah,
he actually sent me video of the camp. He goes, those poor son of a bitches.
Oh my gosh, we go there and it's like the last video, which is the highlight reel, kind of gives you the intel. So
yeah,
you go, oh, it's warm, and it's like these guys are wearing shorts.
Yeah,
and you're running through the desert, like high desert. And we get there, and it's like I don't know, 75, 80 degrees.
Right.
The following day, a winter storm comes through, and it's like sub 30 degrees. Yeah, it's like 20 something degrees.
In May, right?
In May.
Yeah.
And so it's snowing on us, and nobody has gear. So I had all the snivel gear, but I didn't have boots. So I had Solomon's because I thought I'm going to be running up and down a trail, and I want to win. We took third in the competition, but I wanted to win.
Right.
And so I didn't think, hey, I need to bring crispy boots or, you know, my hunting boots. And now I don't leave home without them because I suffered and my feet were wet for 2.5 days, and it sucked. And most guys on my team, just because they had down selected the right boot, they were prepared on accident. So most of them didn't have cold weather gear, and we were going to the local Tractor Supply to buy some cold weather gear and gloves. So, even a preparedness guy is not always prepared, but if it's on the forefront of your mind, you're kind of thinking about it and being proactive in it. That's what we want people to do.
Yeah. And I think it's so important. And you guys do other stuff, like you were talking about some of the other courses you do, and you do self-defense and pistol training and all that stuff, which I think everybody should do that. Everybody. Because it is so important that you understand. We don't live in a city. When we're sitting in Salt Lake right now, and yesterday we walked into one of the sketchiest Walmarts I've ever been in here in Salt Lake.
Yeah.
It's underneath the interstate, for God's sakes. And I went, I am not prepared for this. And I look around at the other 3 guys that were with me. I went, I bring the wrong 3 guys. There's 2 guys in my group that don't leave anywhere without a pistol, and none of them are sitting here.
Yeah.
We're walking around this sketchy Walmart by ourselves with no pistol, nothing.
Yeah.
And it could have easily been bad.
Yeah, my pistol's sitting right behind us. If I come down to a city, even if I'm out and about in Heber City where I live, which is like Pleasantville.
Yeah.
I mean, it's 16,000 people, and there's like virtually zero crime. My whole mindset is I'm not willing to take a chance.
Right.
And especially when it comes to my kids, I will never accept. I've driven a mile down the road and turned around because I'm like, I'm not going to take that chance.
Right.
Especially with my babies. So we have a motto, and we say, you are your own first response. That's not just self-defense. That's first aid.
Right.
That's situational awareness. So to be proactive and to be thinking about things, you could be prepared mentally, but if you don't have the tools because you left it behind,
doesn't matter.
Because you're lazy, it doesn't matter, right? Yeah. And so we need to create a culture of that. So that's what we're trying to do.
Well, I'm glad you guys did it. You guys came and did a pistol thing with my group, and they still talk about it. In fact, I have new employees that are like, are you guys going to do that again? I said,
we should. It'd be fun.
Probably.
It would be fun.
We should do it when we're down here in Salt Lake because I have most of my crew here anyway.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of local small ranges. We have access to Kafaru's land with Chad down in Spanish Fork, so we can do anything we want to.
Yeah. We should do something like that. Something that'll be cool.
It'd be fun.
So you got out of the CIA and started Fieldcraft, and you guys are at Heber City. You weren't always up there, right?
No, we started actually in California.
Well, that'll make you wonder.
Well, yeah. Let me tell you that there's a good reason. She's my ex-girlfriend now, but she's was super attractive. I say was because I don't know her status now. But she was a big hunter. She was like, I met her online when I was overseas, and she's a big hunter, and she lives in a place called Ione, California.
Okay.
Big shout out to Lynn, my ex-girlfriend. But she was awesome, and I met her, and then her dad was gracious enough to give me a commercial space in his hangar. He had an airplane hangar where he did like survey scans with his airplane over certain areas like wildfires and stuff. And so it was a perfect place to set up. We started the business there, and then I'd say maybe a year into it, I decided to move to Colorado, and I moved to Durango, Colorado. Actually, a town called Bayfield, which is in between Pagosa and Durango.
Beautiful place.
Oh my gosh, I had like the perfect life there. I mean, the only reason I decided to move is because in my house I got virtually no internet.
Yeah.
Backed up to San Juan, had packing horses, like it was like the dream. And then in town, we had the biggest space for commercial real estate, and it was 200 square foot.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
And expensive. Oh my gosh, that's an expensive place
expensive. To live. And then we couldn't get the mail sent out on time because if there was a storm, it had to go to Denver first. So if you ordered 2 to 3 day priority for a hat, you wouldn't get it for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So we couldn't grow a business there. Yeah. So next stop was Prescott, Arizona for us. And Prescott, Arizona was good to us, but it became woke. It still is. Yeah. I mean, there's 100%. a mayor out there who's super woke in Prescott Valley, and he comes from a law enforcement background. And I'm like, what's going on here? And then they had a BLM protest downtown, and the sheriff was concerned because he's like, I don't have the manpower to deal with something like this. Can you guys help us out? So me, Grant, Raul, a whole bunch of guys who had military backgrounds were like on the QRF, the Quick Reaction Force for the sheriff's department. And I'm like, do I want to raise a family here?
Yeah. Do I want my kids going to school with these kids?
I know. And one of the founders of BLM actually moved and became a professor at the Prescott College. And it was all intentional because she wanted to affect those kind of populations, conservative populations. Yeah. And I said, there's no way in hell I'm going to stay here and be part of this political BS.
Yeah.
I'm out. So I uprooted the family and moved them to Heber City.
How'd you pick Utah?
So I like, well, one, I looked at the demographic. Although I am not a member of the LDS or the church or the Mormon church, the Mormon population is very conservative.
Yeah.
And they keep this place with the values and the character of the people and the people that go to those churches really good. And I've heard people go, well, don't you got a problem with the Mormons? I'm like, out of all the populations you could be affiliated with, like I'm good with doing that. Like they're
the least of my worries.
They're the least of my worries, and they're good people. And that for me, who's Christian non-denominational, right? For me was something I wanted to raise my family in. And so far, I mean, everybody's like, oh, you should come to Montana, you should come to Wyoming. And I love the land. I love the rural locations of the West. I'll never move east of the Mississippi, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I realized Utah has everything for my family that we would ever want. And I don't think I'll ever uproot. I think I'll retire and die here.
Yeah. Utah's a great place. You're right. The people here, and one of their ideologies is preparedness.
It is.
They understand that, and out of all of the religions,
oh my gosh,
they're really, really push it.
Their journey here, I mean, is incredible. Yeah. It's a story of resilience and survival in itself.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, last question, or last couple of questions. Why, we've talked about preparedness.
Yeah.
And we've talked about, being ready for whatever happens. What's one or one of the major reasons why you hunt? Why did you kill 2 elk and did all that stuff last fall? What's one of the major reasons?
For me, it's self-reliance. I think we have, all the preparedness stuff that we teach to civilians. When you distill it and you break it down, it actually has a lot to do with us trying to convince Americans that you need to be more self-reliant. We become less reliant because we've outsourced everything to institutions. I mean, we've gifted all of our independence to security, to healthcare, to education, everything with this idea of utopia. That's the idea, right? That everything's going to be fine if we outsource it, except a lot of institutions can't be trusted. And that's not a conspiracy. That's just because people suck. I mean, people make mistakes. People are conditionally flawed. And so if you are hunting, you are taking a percentage of the protein that you feed your family and you are sourcing it yourself. Not only that, but conservation, all the things, the experiences and journey and building resilience in your children and yourself. It's all a process. And it's so bizarre to me that there are citizens in this country who will debate you on hunting. And it's like, man, out of all the things you could debate, you can go to Walmart and pick up your meat and it's nicely, neatly packaged.
Right.
And you're comfortable with that. And you're comfortable with factory farming. And that's okay with you, but you have a problem with me harvesting an animal ethically my own way and feeding my family.
Yeah.
The 2 elk that I harvested this year, I gave 1 to my company. We divided all the meat amongst everybody because when they're breaking bread with their families, I want to know that I somehow impacted that because
more than just a paycheck.
Yeah, it's my appreciation to them is deeper than a revenue stream. And also when my kids are eating, because we eat elk 3 times a week, I want them to understand where that, like I just got my first mount. And it was off of my last year's Deseret hunt on a mule deer.
Yeah.
Beautiful,
Great deer.
Oh, beautiful deer. And when I hung that up, my daughter said, "Daddy, what's that?" And I said, "It's a deer." And she goes, "Oh, the yum, we ate the deer because we've been eating it for a year."
Right.
And she goes, "Oh, the yummy." She goes, "Ooh, that's good." She goes, "Ooh, choo choo," like the rifle, and you kill it, and he goes, "You eat it." And I want them to respect animals, but I also want them to understand where their food comes from. So for me, it's about self-reliance.
So that's interesting because we've met, I don't know, years ago.
Yeah,
and
years.
You asked me a question the first time we met, and I was dumbfounded by the question because I'd never been asked that. You asked me why trophy hunting.
Yeah.
And here we are years later. Now you have a trophy on your wall.
Yeah.
So what does that mean to you now?
Yeah. So it's so crazy because when I first met you guys, the concept of backcountry hunting was very new to me. I had been on a couple Colorado hunts with some buddies, but for me and feeding my kids, because my kids are new.
Right.
So for me, I wasn't a priority, but my kids came along. I'm like, they're the number one priority. When I started looking at what I was going to select and working with good guides who were about conservation first and foremost before anything else, it came down to we want the most mature. We want it was all what you saw through glass and the antlers.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so what is that? He's like, that's scoring right. That's the one we need to take. And so I realized it's for me, because I'm not overly impressed with antler, but when you score mature bulls, it's part of the process of getting a mature animal who's lived a long life. And at the peak of their performance, you're going to ethically take their life. And so taking their head and putting it on the wall, for me, before I talked to you, was foreign. But now I realized the whole process, the whole journey. I remember every single thing about that animal. I could tell you the bullet, how I saw it enter his body, the impact. I could tell you the rifle. I could tell you the day. I could tell you all these memories, because I now have a tangible reminder that looks me in the face every time I walk by it. So, I'm not a big drinker, but if I get whiskey, it's usually the Eastmans edition because you guys are gracious enough to give me some of that. I sit there and I'm with my family, and we often recall over meals kind of that experience.
Yeah.
And it means the world to me. I have an elk head sitting in my backyard right now because we're about to skin it and do a European mount.
Right.
Because I want to remember the same.
Yeah, and it's a 3D memory.
It is.
And I tell people all the time, I said, I don't have a lot of trophies. People think I have huge trophy rooms. I don't have a lot of them, but every single one of them is very impactful. And when I see it, I can taste the air. I can smell what is happening. I can feel the cold or the rain or whatever situation. Photos don't do that justice.
They don't.
Video doesn't even do it.
It doesn't. Sometimes I like pet the deer.
Yeah,
I'm like, and my daughter, when she was super curious before we hung it up, both my son and daughter were intimidated. And I brought them over and I said, this is an animal that Daddy killed for food.
Yeah.
And they understood that. And I said, it's okay. It's an animal and it's beautiful, but we have to eat it. And they understood. And then we went in the room and we ate, we ate mule deer, which is great.
That's so cool.
It's so fun.
It was for me when you and I had that first conversation. I was my eyes were open to a lot of Americans or people don't understand that.
They don't understand.
Yeah, until they've done it.
Yeah, they need context. What I've realized in being on podcasts and social media and marketing and all this stuff, putting out a lot of information, a lot is lost in translation, and it's good to have podcasts like yours and just conversations so you could kind of unravel what it actually means.
Yeah, that's cool. So another question I have, this is hopefully it doesn't take you by surprise, but what are you going to be thinking about on your deathbed? What is the one thing that you live every day for, so that when you're on your deathbed, and hopefully it's slow, hopefully it's not a car crash or something crazy, what are you going to be thinking about your impact?
So there's two parts to that. One, I thought about this when I was young, because when I went to war early on in the global war on terror, I thought I was going to die. My son is named after two teammates that were killed, one in an accident and one in an accident in my arms. The other, who's a real good friend of mine, who died in an IED explosion overseas. But I've reflected on this, where when I often think or get down, and I'm, everybody ebbs and flows in life.
Yeah.
Every time I'm at the bottom of a draw, the way I pull myself out is all the things that I'm living for now, all the things that I'm doing and collecting memories are for that one moment, if given the opportunity, to reflect back on my life and know that I lived a fulfilled and meaningful life. If in that moment I have the opportunity to reflect on that, then the transition of life to death is going to be easy. I've seen the transition of life to death personally for people who weren't prepared for that moment and who didn't live their life the right way. So they go into that moment, they panic, they know there's no taking back, they live with regret, and then they die. And I've seen their faces, I've seen their expressions frozen in time and certainly frozen in my memory. But I've also seen that transition for people who were prepared, who lived a meaningful life, and who went out on their deathbed, figuratively speaking, the way they wanted to. So it impacts me in day-to-day moments. I mean, even last night I was getting down about some stuff, and I'm like, dude, what do you have to be upset about? You have beautiful children, you have a beautiful family, great opportunities working with partners like you. Like, what do you have? Like, what? There's so many different things that you could be down and about. In Africa, everybody's down and about because it's a difficult life. What do we have to worry about here? We have a lot of abundance and we have a lot of opportunities, and that shifted my mindset. But I constantly think, man, I hope I get the opportunity to reflect and reflect on a good life. That would be my answer.
That's so cool. That's something I haven't heard. That you're talking firsthand. You've seen this where it didn't go that way.
Yeah.
And we're all living for, and that's why I asked that question, because I want my audience to be thinking that question for themselves. What is important to you, and if it is important, live that day for it.
Yeah.
Don't take advantage. Like you were talking 9 to 5. If you're living every day to fish, live every day to fish.
Yeah.
And do it.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Well, I appreciate you coming on. You know, it's always fun. You and I have deep conversations every time we sit down, and I appreciate your outlook. I appreciate what you guys are doing with Fieldcraft. You're helping people live those moments so that when it does happen, they're prepared.
Yeah.
And, you know, this country's only going to get crazier.
Yeah, it is. I'm optimistic about people, not so optimistic about our government and the direction we're headed. But if people band together in communities, which is part of resilience, and, you know, the hunting community is a perfect example of this. They're better bonded in community and families and values than anybody else. So, no, what you're doing is important, and I appreciate it. Coming from a family business who's done this for generations, it's really cool to sit down with you and learn from you.
Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey folks, thanks for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You got to hang out with some of the people that I think are the most interesting I've ever met. And remember, fair chase is the only way to hunt and take trophy big game. See you next time right here on Eastman's Podcast Edition.